Hello, my name is Reed Taylor, and the question that I'll be asking will be how have concussions become an issue in Australian contact sports? I'll go into further detail during the presentation. Just a background of the issue. The issue is obviously concussions in the NRL. Uh, c- Concussions have been a continuous problem in the NRL, and according to Kent, in our modern day of sport, it is considered to be one of the most severe injuries that has occurred in any contact sport. More so, head injuries such as concussions within the sport, that is rugby league, has become a growing issue. In order to explore how concussions have become a significant issue in the NRL, we must ask firstly, what is concussion? Concussion refers to the disturbance of the brain function caused by either direct or indirect force to the head. This being said, the Department of Sport and Recreation explains that the general recovery of concussion can be between 10 to 14 days of injury. However, some cases can be delayed over weeks or even months. This has shown a complication amongst players who play weeks after concussion. Following these complications, players can also be at a high risk of injury or repeated concussion whilst playing, and they can be affected by with things such as physiological problems, such as depression and other mental health issues. It can also cause brain swelling and long-term damage to the brain functioning. In this presentation, I will explore more problems and investigate how the NRL has brought its attention to concussions, and I will show and it will show ways that they mitigate and explore further injuries for the future of the game. Aims of the research. It's pretty straightforward. The initial research that has been conducted is to find ways to mitigate and address the issue in concussions in the NRL. Secondly, examine statistics and find reasons as to why this is such a recurring problem and issue in the game. And to generally just get an idea on how NRL are tackling the issue head on. And finally, what rules and strategies are being implemented into the game to reduce the likelihood of reoccurrence. For example, head injury assessments when a head collision does take place on the field, and just to ensure players' welfare is not in jeopardy because it has been in the past. Why is this research substantial? Due to the fact that it is just a reoccurring issue and it is a contact sport and physical contact happens at literally every play. So head collisions are reasonably high at a high risk. To reduce further injury when a head collision does happen on the pitch. And here's a graph here down in the bottom left corner, and this graph just shows evidence as to why the research is so significant. And it states 191 concussions have occurred during the 15 seasons, provided with an increase of concussions from the 1998 to the 2013 seasons. Overall, a significant increase of reported concussions could be due to the increased degree of reporting to club doctors as their role has become more important over time. Secondly, the professionalism of clubs has shown a grey area until 2008 upwards, where concussion started to become more of a concern for players' safety and well-being. This is the conceptual framework that I have made up. It is a conceptual framework that guides development for head injury assessment into the NRL. So the NRL HIA rules will need to be implemented into the game, and the sport would be NRL, obviously. The sport will then need to educate the athlete on what happens when you do have a head injury, and a head injury assessment will take place once you have a collision. The athletes will need to make sure they are communicating properly with their coaches and also their medical doctors. The coaches and trainers will need to communicate with the medical doctors because at the end of the day, the medical doctor has the authority to tell the player whether they're allowed to keep playing or whether they have to be taken off and not allowed to return to play. So the bottom three triangle is the most important because the communication needs to be spot on for that to work. Methodology. To determine how head injuries such as concussion has become an issue in rugby league, I utilise three methods. These three methods are an online survey, in-depth interview, and extensive primary research. My primary research that I'll be undertaking will observe how the first grade competition, that is the National Rugby League competition, identifies and mitigates the risk of a concussion on field head injury assessment test. Next, I'll look into concussions off the field or how clubs are ensuring adequate education to all coaching staff, club doctors, and players. Next, I will look at the frequency of concussions received by players. I also examine whether or not coaching staff are allowing players to return to the field regardless if they have showed symptoms of a concussion. The online survey that I am going to conduct will be aimed to ask questions and also determine why concussions have been a growing issue in the game of rugby league. These questions will consist of multiple choice and open-ended short responses to gain as much accurate data as possible. Once the data has been collected, then it'll just be evaluated and it'll show all the statistics if it's a significant issue or not, which obviously is. The interview questionnaire. Okay, so I am going to be interviewing ex-player, and he is now a community relationship manager of the Parramatta Eels, and his name goes by Michael Basson. The questions will obviously be just to broaden the knowledge on how concussion was addressed during his career. He suffered a significant 10 concussions during his playing career in the NRL. How will I be gathering this interview? Well, I'm lucky enough to have a friend that lives next door to him, so I'm just gonna walk politely up to his house and knock on his door and see if I can interview him, and hopefully he just lets me, because my friend said he's a good guy and he's up for things like this, so I think it should be okay. Extensive primary research. This research method will conduct statistics based on the 2016-17 NRL season. The evidence shows that there was an increase in head injury assessments due to the strengthened concussion guidelines. The NRL becoming aware of the issue and that they are implementing strict rules. Then this is bottom left here is where the 2016-17 NRL season, and just shows the statistics of what's been happening over the year. Ethical considerations. Whilst constructing the surveys, there were multiple ethical elements that were taken into consideration and addressed to ensure the data was still considered valid, but the ethical concern of all the respondents' privacy. This will involve storing their data, which in that way was presented along with the use of respondents' names, along with their surveys, will just be seen by my own eyes and whoever will be reading my report. Secondly, that each respondent's name will be kept anonymous to make sure there will be no associations or bias with the answers. This enable the samples to be kept in closed environment, which will allow for honesty and that the respondent's answers won't be seen by any other respondent as well. My third privacy concern was the storage of all the responses. Once I am done with the respondent's answers, I can make sure that the survey will be deleted to ensure that the answers are confidential. Overall, it is vital that I had delivered adequate level of consent, as the answers may be needed for review. before anyone takes the survey and whatnot, I'm just gonna make them sign a consent, and they're going to be anyone under the age of 18, because then they'll obviously need parents' consent, and yeah, nothing will be breached because it'll say in the contract they sign before they take take the surveys and stuff. This is my reference list. If there's any questions that you need to ask me, I'll be happy to answer all of the questions. So thank you for listening.